Welcome back. To kickstart session 2, Futureproofing Businesses Against Rising Climate Risks and Impacts, may I invite Engineer Dr. Zhou, Head of Corporate Sustainability of Hang Seng Bank, to give us a presentation on this important topic. Engineer Dr. Zhou, please.
Hi. Thank you very much for BEC for inviting me here. The BEC Environmental Series is always the best conference. I came because I came here every year. And I'm Shelley from Hang Seng Bank. So at the last panel discussion, I tried my very best to catch up a lot of important words. And I think Nancy left. Nancy said very important called demand acceleration. That means how we can accelerate demand from our customers, the corp basically here. And I think we also heard some other words, like what? Finance. So gaps, right? It's not actually first mover, but how to operationalize it. And also a very key word is business case. So now I thought I have 15 minutes, or 10 minutes. I have 10 minutes from me to talk a little bit from the banking industry, banking center. Everybody knows that. So from last session, we also talked about something called risk and opportunity, correct? So then you say, okay, what do you want you have to do basically? It's not something nice to have. It's because climate change, no matter extreme weather, no matter the sector decarbonization, that will impose a very important risk to the bank. Because our facility, our asset, our lending portfolio, our investment portfolio. So that is a risk. That means it's not I'm going to be the first mover, although we want to be. It's because we have to do now while the risk is in future. So that is on the risk side. Then you will ask how you to do that, how you to handle that risk. So that's one part. On the other hand side is also the opportunity to us. Dr. Dai, right? Dr. Dai talked about the financing gaps. They talk about a lot of opportunity in terms of climate finance as well as green finance. So put in this way, when Serena talked about the ecosystem, the bank can be a facilitator to try to line up all the players within the ecosystem. Ecosystem, not only the members of BEC or the corporates, but also a lot of the members are the solution provider. On one hand side, you accelerate demand. No, everybody here, accelerate demand. That means we need to go for decarbonize. On the other hand side, we also need to scale up, grow those solution providers like a lot of you here, right? Bank, as Serena mentioned, we just play a facilitator role in the ecosystem to line up them together by using maybe, in this special case, is blend finance. Public money, private money, bankers' money, investor money, right? So that is opportunity basically for us. So if you say, do you have a business case here? Yes, we do. Because on one hand side, we need to tackle the risk to make sure our credit, to make sure we are still very, very stable in terms of our lending portfolio. On the other hand side, it's our opportunities that measure from the financing, the investment opportunities. So that is why I'm here to talk about the Hang Seng Bank. So every one of you here know Hang Seng Bank. Last year, I was also here. I remember very clearly here. I talked about last year, we set our vision. It's a sustainability vision to be, we want to commit to, we call it future-proofed business. So very aligned with today's conference forum. Future-proof means we think climate change specifically to us is a risk. So how we can have future-proof operation, product and services, systems, process, people with future-proof skills to build up that future-proof business. And of course, very focused on the customer and the market transition to net zero. Now, throughout the year, it's just like my reporting season, right? I come back to BEC. Thank you very much, Simon, for me to report here. Throughout the year, we did a lot of things. But one thing is, if we want to tackle climate risk, what should we do? First of all, in the bank, we're very concerned about governance. So the first thing we do is to strengthen the climate governance. To strengthen climate governance, that means climate change is not something standalone. It has to be incorporated into our governance structure. So on this table, although a little bit too small, you cannot see, we have the opportunity as well as a risk, as I mentioned, right? On the opportunity side, that means we have the governance structure from the board level, management level, to the working group level, how we try to commercialize sustainability expertise. On the risk side, we try very hard to see how we can solve that, because we have very important, we call it risk governance structure or risk framework. But you think about climate risk, is it a standalone risk type? No. Climate risk should be incorporated into all the risk type. Everything. Operational resilience, wholesale credit risk, retail credit risk, regulatory compliance risk, strategic reputational risk, as well as stress testing, right? So that means instead we set a standalone structure for the climate risk. We incorporate into our RMM, Risk Management Committee, and we have a standing agenda there. You say, oh, Shelley, this is very simple. No. If you work in a corporate for long, you don't think that is a simple process, because that is very important governance structure change. So that is what we talk about. And in between, we also have some supporting governance, which were very related to the opportunity we called Sustainable Finance Forum. So Karina will be very familiar with Sustainable Finance governance structure, because people will challenge you about greenwashing. To anti-greenwashing, we could not rely on the government regulation standards, although I want to, so that we need to build up more stringent governance structure internally. What that means? That means under this governance structure, we have our own standards, quite high standards. We have our own framework and a governance forum for that. That means I need to sit there. For each deal, I need to say, okay, this is not okay. So yes, so that is one thing I want to share with you, how we strengthen our climate governance. This is just a wrap up our climate strategy. So you can see we're very clear we want to be a net zero bank, not only our operation, but try to contribute to supply chain as well as finance emission. Supporting our customer is very important pillar for us, because we have to support our customers, that is for the commercialization as well as easy to set a business case, of course, right? Last but not least, also have a community pillar. I will go through very quickly to see, I think this is just reporting season, to see what we have done last year, basically. I think last year, I already said, we are very happy that we got our bank building one of the best in Hong Kong for bank buildings. we got the GBC's GBC Green Building Grant Awards last year. So other than that, we also have the quite ambitious renewable energy targets. Yeah, so far, I think by last year, 40% our electricity are from renewable sources. And I'm not going to detail about the data analytical systems, as is Patrick, this expert here saying, oh, what yet? So I'm not going to talk about all this, but I want to share with you maybe later on. I want to share with you from the people's perspective, because we think that is also very important items for the people, how you engage your colleagues. So basically for our headquarter transformation project, oh, by the way, I would like to invite all of you to visit our central branch. We just renovated. Now you can see a brand new Hang Seng Bank in Central for our central branch, okay? Maybe by end of year will be even better because you can have the transparent the branch we called Future Banking version 2.0. Not Future Banking 1.0. Now we have 2.0. We have different ideas in terms of sustainability as well as technology. Here is just our workplaces. We want to try to build up people-centered workplaces. Basically provide the variety of the function areas for people to rest, to relax, to have the work-life balance. Move to the supporting our customers. We are quite proud of this year. We have done a lot in terms of the sustainable finance. Actually, just this June, we launched 18 Hong Kong billion Sustainability Power Up Fund. You say, what does that mean? Under that 18 billion Sustainability Power Up Fund, we have 3 pillars. One pillar is that how I think Serena mentioned about get some incentive or the subsidy from the government, right? For example, HKMA will have the green bond, green loan, some incentives. But however, we also try to accelerate the SME take-up of the sustainable finance. So that's why we also provide the incentive subsidy under one pillar. We work with HKQAA. We set up the green finance, green equipment finance. This is a platform to make the SME apply for green loan much easy, much quick, much easy, less costly. Last but not least, here's my baby. That is called Hang Seng Carbon Academy. So Hang Seng Carbon Academy has been launched. For those of you who know me for many years, I always want to have a carbon academy here in Hong Kong because I teach at HKUST on carbon management. Now, we have the Hang Seng Carbon Academy, and we also have the first, our global bank clients, our large bank clients, big clients, with Tangas, with HMTR, with a lot of our big clients to launch our GB Global Banking Clients Engagement. And we'll also invite Hong Kong Stock Exchange to talk about ISSB S2 as well as Scope 3 emission. How the big guys to engage your supply chain, how to engage and manage and reduce your supply chain carbon emission, i.e. your Scope 3 emission. And I think next year, we'll have different collaborations with different NGOs, university. For example, we just launched a partnership with Hong Kong U, with CTU Hong Kong. And on that one, we also have one sustainability as well as the talent development pillar. So that is on our finance. But if you know Hong Kong, you know Hang Seng, we also have the Hang Seng indexes. We also have our investment companies. Both are our subsidiaries. So for Hang Seng indexes, this is our 15th anniversary. And we actually have 29 ESG-related indexes. by Hang Seng indexes, and also have the largest ETF provider in terms of AUM under ESG from our asset managers. I'm not going to more detail that, so I only have 1 minute to. Okay. Yes, this is our PowerPoint. Okay. So I will go quickly. I'm not going to talk about the ecosystem because I think we already talked a lot how the bank can, with different steps, solution providers, SMEs, and the community, how we can benefit and set up, accelerate this ecosystem because as we all know that decarbonization, net zero transition cannot be delivered by one company, need to have the very comprehensive ecosystem. But last one I want to share a little bit to you is that when we talk about all these things, there is one element is very important. That means your staff, you need to understand what you are talking about. So to upskill our colleagues is a fundamental thing, and we treat this year, 2024, as our sustainability foundation year. Means we provide bank-wide training, workshops, different forms, okay, different forms, like capstone project for bank talents, MTs, the forums, like the role-based bespoke sections, role plays. So there are a lot of things, okay, invite people to try. So that is also very important, and we also have so-called ESG for all, with, I think, 8 modules. Not quite a lot, like 1.5 hours, and with 100% full-time staff required. My CEO said, required training, 100%, that is my KPI. Okay, yes, so with that, I end my presentation. What I want to say very quickly, the key point from me is that it's not something nice to have. Sustainability is not a stand-alone department. Our vision is very clear. We just want to embed sustainability into our operation, into our product and service, our offerings, our customer relationships, our community investments. While sustainability is a very broad topic, climate change is what we are currently focused on. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Engineer Dr. Zhou. Maybe you can pass the mic to me. Thank you. Yeah, for showcasing Hang Seng's business case as a green bank and also a facilitator of sustainable finance. So before we move on to the panel discussion, may I remind you that similar to the previous session, online participants are welcome to use the Q&A box if you have any questions for our speakers. For the audience in this room, please raise your hands and we will pass you the mic. And just wait for a few more minutes to set up the stage. All right, now may I invite our moderator of this session, Mr. Michael Long, Group Head of Sustainability of New World Development Company Limited, and Engineer Dr. Zhou to proceed to the stage. Please also join me in welcoming our other panelists to the stage for the panel discussion. They are Ms. Shelley Jiang, Chief Technical and Innovation Officer, General Insurance, Greater China, AXA Group, Dr. Kevin Kwan, Managing Director, Sustainability and Risk Governance, Link Asset Management. And last but not least, Mr. Dipjay Sanchania, Director, Climate and Energy, adidas. Mr. Long, over to you, please.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for your time. And it's great we've got a timer here because it's how I'm going to try and keep us all in check with talking and making sure that this discussion stays relevant and insightful and hopefully engaging for you all. So thanks for your time today. I think really what I'll start off with a bit of a prelude, and then we'll introduce the speakers, and then we might ask, hopefully, some insightful questions. I think a few prompts for the audience to think about, 69 stock exchanges in the world globally are taking actions around climate-related disclosure on stock exchanges. Of those, 40 have detailed more prescriptive guidance on those, and of those, a very small handful, including the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, London Stock Exchange, Singapore Stock Exchange, and I think Japan as well, have actually made mandatory disclosure around climate-related risk. Okay, so for a start, we've got a regulatory driver happening in the background. Thirdly, particularly relevant to a number of our panel members, in 2023, it was the fourth consecutive year in which insured losses from natural disasters surpassed $100 billion globally. And the other key takeaway here is particularly in Asia, while the Asia region only accounted for 17% of that, and Chelsea's probably going to pull me up on my numbers, but of that 17%, which was attributed to Asia, 91% of that was uninsured losses. In other words, in Asia, we're only really getting insurance coverage for about 9% of the total losses that are occurring. So you can see the kind of impact it has to the organisations. And finally, just another prompt for us to a bit of a think about, and I will tie all these together, is that, China's a national emissions trading scheme. They published a draft policy. It was always covering energy. They've now expanded this to concrete, aluminium and steel. This new plan will go from 40% to 60% of the total emissions in China's economy. But I would ask the people in the room, how many organisations have actually worked out the financial implications of this to their manufacturing, their processes, their cost of operations, not only today, but over the next few years. So here's a number of physical and transitional things that we want to talk about today. And we're fortunate to have, it's sometimes you end up on panels where, you've got everyone thinking the same, and it's great that we've actually got a really diverse profile here, because we've got Chelsea, and I'll let everyone introduce themselves, but Chelsea from the insurance sector, which is a hugely important lens, and they sit on probably the largest mountain of real data that I think is really pertinent. We've got Shelley from the banking, the finance sector, their exposure, how they're looking at risks and how they're looking at where their money goes and how they're supporting, but also how they're exposed. We've also got Calvin in the real estate, in the real estate sector, really looking at not only how climate physically affects assets and operations, but how it affects how people use those and what might be not only the value of those assets today, but should they sell those assets in the future, how is the market going to assess these assets? And finally, Dipjay, in Adidas, really looking at, with a huge global footprint, from manufacturing to distribution, how does climate and changing people's behaviour, but also the markets they operate in, how do you juggle those parameters? So before we kick off into questions, maybe just if each of you just could talk briefly, I've obviously introduced you, but talk a little bit about climate in regards to your particular role in the organisation. Thank you.
So I guess I'll start, Michael. So your numbers are quite accurate, so I won't correct you. But so my name is Chelsea. Thank you for inviting me to this lovely event. My role is the Chief Technical and Innovation Officer for AXA in General Insurance for Greater China. What that means, it's a very long title and it often gets mistaken for IT, managing IT. But the technical part of my role is really looking at underwriting risk, pricing for risk, and creating insurance solutions through products that we sell to customers. And as Michael said, large part of what insurance companies have been paying out is nature and nat cat related type of claims. So, when Michael mentioned around the 90% that is not insured, just to add on to that, actually that is two reasons. One is because people don't have any coverage okay? And often we see in Asia, in particularly Hong Kong, it's around business interruption, right? So people do not have adequate or any coverage for business interruption. And this is applied across the spectrum of the sizes of companies and also industries of companies. So that's often the case. I think at AXA, we have been collecting data, and I know that one of my colleagues from AXA Climate will be speaking at the event today as well. We've set up a specialist team called AXA Climate to investigate and look into the different aspects of climate change and how it will impact our portfolios, but also our customers, right? Most importantly, your risks going forward.
Still need to introduce myself. So basically, I'm the head of corporate sustainability at the Hang Seng Bank, and also sit in the executive committee. So basically, oversee the sustainability and the climate strategy, governance, and everything related to sustainability. So with the major role as how to embed sustainability into all the operations and product and services, even as I mentioned, community investment. Yeah, so like I mentioned in my presentation. Kevin?
Thanks, everybody. Great to be on the panel with everyone. I appreciate this. So at Link, I am head of our sustainability and risk governance. Started off with sustainability and then taking over risk governance a few years back as well. Interestingly, in our organization, climate change shows up both on the sustainability side and on the risk side. So with the risks component, it reports up to our ARMC. So it is on the radar of our board from the risk perspective. Sustainability, we have a separate committee looking at this, again, board level committee, and they will look at some of these issues as well. In addition to that, I sit on our risk and due diligence committee as well as our investment committee. So that gives you some insights into where climate change decarbonization fits into the organization. We're looking at from an operational perspective, that focus on reducing energy consumption and decarbonizing the portfolio. But more importantly, we are also expanding the business. So this gives you insight that climate change considerations, decarbonization considerations are factored into where we invest, what we invest into, and Michael, as you mentioned, how long we might want to hold an asset for as well. As part of this entire journey, one of the key things that I've learned is that you cannot do this on your own. All of you know this, but it's important to find the right partners to work with. Whether it's peers, Michael, we've worked on a few things together. Other industries, Chelsea, we've done things on together. We've worked with financial sector as well to push things such as green finance, green bonds. And I think later on in this discussion, I'll share some new innovation that we've had most recently as well.
Fantastic.
Thanks. Thank you. First of all, thank you, BEC, for inviting. And good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I know we are sitting between lunch and you, and I will try to be as sharp and as appetizing as possible. As Michael introduced, I work for adidas. My role is, I'm an energy and carbon strategist. I look at the global portfolio of adidas, especially from the supply chain side, which, just to give you a size of it, we look at about 400 plus factories owned by a third party, and that's spread across about 25 countries. So I constantly need to play a piano of different tunes, and looking at this different geographies, what kind of regulations are coming, what kind of regulations are supporting, what kind of regulations are challenging, how the commercials of different decarbonization or energy technologies are playing in different markets. And ultimately, as I think previous panel was talking about, also the building business case, because it's the factory not operated by adidas, it's operated by a third party. I cannot just tell them to do something and then they do it. I need to convince them, I need to have that right balance of trade between us and them. So that's the work that I do at adidas. Ultimately, supply chain, contributing close to 95% of adidas carbon emission, so scope 3 emissions is part of that, and my team plays a big role in that, ultimately leading to board KPI of decarbonizing our corporate carbon footprint. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Dipjay. So, if you're new to this concept, you can see that this really touches so many aspects of core business. So I think with that, and you mentioned towards the end there, particularly around so many geographies and legalities, I might start with that first, and I might start with you, Calvin. You know, with climate disclosure coming in the market, I know we're part of large organisations that have a long history in disclosing that, but for organisations experiencing they're starting out on the journey and maybe having to disclose for the first time, and knowing what you know and lessons learnt and what you've been through, I might start with you firstly, Calvin, and then Shelley and Dipjay. What would you be recommending to an organisation? There's a broad array of things they could focus on. Where do you think you would really recommend them to start that adds the most meaningful value?
Thanks. I think I might have two takeaways. The first, and this is something that some of you might have heard me say before, always remember that scientists don't make policies and that policymakers don't understand science. That can also stretch to decision makers. And when you look at that from an organizational perspective, that should give you some insights into how to manage these issues. So the first thing is really make it simple and make it relevant or relatable to who your target audience is. When you look at TCFD, I think it's a very big, hairy beast. And how do you whittle it down to something that you can understand? How can you get your peers to relate to it? So one of the first things that we did on our side on climate risk assessment is to focus specifically on typhoons and flooding, because everybody in this room experiences that in Hong Kong. More importantly, if I told you that one of you in this room, before you left home today, you left your water running, you know that when you go back, it's going to be flooded. What will happen? So some of you are thinking, shoot, was it me or not? Right? But the point here is that you can relate to that, and you can understand flooding leads to certain damage, and how do we deal with this? On our side, when we did one of our first climate risk assessments, it was to anchor the scenario of Typhoon Mangkhut 2018. Right? And then we did the assessment, what the flooding might be. We knew what it was. At that time, if I remember correctly, we did a 5-meter scenario, which was Typhoon Mangkhut, that actual event. And that gave us insight into, okay, what did we experience and what could have happened? And then what we let people know is that Typhoon Mangkhut did not hit at the worst possible time. It wasn't high tide. So if it hit at high tide, then storm surges would have been 6 meters. And therefore, we anchored that discussion, how many more properties would have been affected by this? And then you can literally see what could have happened at high tide. And then the PM teams can understand, oh, these are the properties we need to prioritize. These are even the locations in the properties that will be at risk. They can relate to that. It's not saying something, 2030, 2050, this is what's going to happen. It's very, very relatable. Get people to understand the issue right away.
Yeah, okay. And so just quickly, you mentioned there about making it simple, and the second element of that is, I guess, using that real life examples so people can immediately relate to it. Okay. Shelley? Someone starting out, you're going to be reading their climate disclosure report. What would you be looking for as the first thing they put? Because they could put, 100 pages in a report, but really what would a bank be looking at?
First steps, right? So first step, I think, always for me as an engineer by training is get your baseline. So no matter you use an external expert or use internal colleagues, so you need to understand where you are first. In terms of climate risk assessment, there are two pieces, right? So on one hand side is a physical climate risk piece. So that is a climate risk assessment. On the other hand side is a carbon management, carbon footprint piece. So that is also go back to the ISSB's climate scope 1, 2, 3 emission reporting. So the first thing is, I think, get your baseline from two pieces, two angles. The second is perform the gap analysis. But at this moment, I guess, as I mentioned in my presentation, you need to upskill your people. You need to let people understand what you are talking about. Okay, because in your first baseline, normally a lot of companies will use a consultant to help with the different solutions, the different scenarios, right? Different, what they call database scenarios, solutions. But at the second piece, at the second level, then you need to let people understand what does it mean. Kevin's example is very good, real life story, right? For us, it's like I will share maybe later on our portfolio portfolio management. That means our RM relationship manager really feel that, oh, I'm in my client in this sector could be very high, has a high risk in terms of climate change. So, for example, in future climate decarbonization roadmap. Okay, so that is 1, 2. So after these 2, so one is baseline. The second is perform the gap analysis, upskill your people. Okay. So these are the 3 things I think for the first start. Okay. People start to the journey. Yep.
Yep. And Dipjay, broad spectrum, multiple geographies, multiple markets. If you were seeing, someone in clothing, apparel, sportswear, manufacturing, textiles coming into it for the first time, and they're exposed to climate-related, disclosure, where would you sort of say, look, this is the best place to kind of start that is going to offer some meaning, or the right place to start?
Sure. So, as somebody who is customer-centric, I'll start with the customer, right? And you guys are here. My audience is my customer for this next hour. So maybe let me bring you in this conversation rather than just preaching you here. How many of you think for your climate risk, the end consumer is your chief risk officer? If you can raise your hand. If not, how many of you think the end consumer for your climate risk is your board? Again, come on guys, be interactive, okay? Okay, last one. How many of you think your real consumer of the climate risk is institutional investor? Right? Yes, yeah. That's correct answer. So if you look at the TCFD and the details and how it entire thing originated, the climate risk assessment, disclosure, and approach to that is coming from the institutional investor. So to solve anything or to work on anything, as I said, as a customer-centric person, I would really understand what's the end consumer, who is end consumer, what are his pain points, what are his requirements. That's the first thing I would understand. So if you look at from that perspective, the reason the entire climate risk movement has started, disclosure movement has started, is about because when the capital markets look at any asset class, equity or underlying business that some of you are operating or owning, is an asset class. The value of that business depends on the risk and reward associated to those businesses, right? And that's how the capital market price in the value of that business. Over the years now, the markets have realized that climate risk have become a real, more material, and can have a significant impact on risk and reward ratios. And that's why they would like to understand what is the management's approach to that, first of all, does strategy and approach covers the climate risk as one of the material topic? And if yes, how are they addressing it? And if yes, then what is the quantification of it? So I think the quantification comes really at the last. I think first thing, because the entire community understands that, hey, everything around climate risk right now is a very nascent stage. Nobody is asking today to disclose the report or calculate the risk with the same level of accuracy as your financial statement. So I think first thing is to understand this is the ultimate need. Sell this thing within your organization. Tell your CFO, tell your board, tell your leadership that, hey, we are starting this journey. Our objective is to have that right, first of all, right mindset and a strategy and approach towards accepting climate could be a risk and it has an opportunity as well. Let's identify what's a broader risk and opportunities on climate in your business value chain. Then let's look at, without really jumping into first on quantification, let's look at if these are the business risk and opportunities, what should be our approach? What should be the governance structure we put in place around that? And then we can start working on much more minute details such as, let's say, climate simulations, right? And then where you map out all your assets and then you run maybe 1.5 degree or 2 degree scenarios and you maybe in the next 10, 15 years' time, you look at it, how those assets will perform and stuff like that. So yeah, first is to sell the concept, like, hey, what's the ultimate purpose? Then upskill them about need for strategy, approach, and then really work on the nitty-gritties of it. Because I especially if you're a medium-sized company, I would not ask you to straight away jump on a very detailed simulation. It will not give you a great numbers or great results.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So look, a key takeaway for the audience might be, when you have a look at your actual core investors in your organisation, have you actually done the exercise of profiling your top 30 investors in your organisation and what their publicly stated positions are around decarbonisation and climate? Because that's something I've done, and I assure you it is a great conversation with the leadership and the board to be able to highlight how many of your top institutional investors have very, very clear positions around climate and carbon. And, to your point, what institutional investors, it really shows that it becomes a very much more meaningful discussion around the commercial implications. Let's quickly jump, and I'm going to now start speeding up the discussion a bit, so I'm going to be rude and butt into people's answers if they take too long. Let's get into the physical. So, Chelsea, now that we're going to get physical, let's do it, rock and roll. Can you maybe talk a little bit about the process, and I know it can be a very in-depth one, but what is the process from an insurance perspective that you're adopting to actually understand that physical risk, and what might organisations really start to take away from that, thinking, if my insurer's looking at this should I be looking at this?
Yeah, so I think for most of you, and I think Calvin touched on this, NatCat is probably the most, typhoons and flooding and actual losses is closest to your heart and your experience, right? So traditionally, the insurance industry is focused on NatCats for physical risk, okay? So nowadays you'll hear insurers talk about secondary perils, okay? What does that mean? It means traditional non-NatCats that are now also causing a significant amount of loss within the insurance portfolios. So when we talk...
what are they? Yeah.
So actually flooding is not a NatCat normally. So we call that a secondary peril. It might be very surprising to you, but we've never seen flooding in Hong Kong, right, as a primary peril or a NatCat. So NatCats for us are earthquakes, typhoons.
Was that before last year?
Well, that was, before last year, Calvin. You can talk about that later. But, essentially, I think that's the focus. That's normally the focus insurers look at, okay? So what does that mean for all of you guys? And I have to go back to Dipjay's question there. Who sees their end customer as their chief risk officer? I think I'm probably the only person in the room that will put up my hand, because essentially when these kind of natural events happen, whether it's primary or secondary perils, it highly depends on your actions, your reactions, and your preventative measures that you have in place in order to control or mitigate or avoid those losses, right? So for me, you guys are essentially my chief risk officers. Right, so that's really how we're looking at it from an insurance perspective.
Okay, great. And Calvin, just quickly, how did you jump into the physical climate risk assessment? Did you gather a team of 50 professionals and get them on your books and work on this? Did you pick a proprietary system off the shelf? How did you quickly try and do an exercise that if you're starting from scratch, could take years and years.
So right now there are a lot of different solutions that are available. Quite frankly, we've trialed 4 different solutions. I can give details to any of you later on. And the beauty behind this is actually all 4 of the results of those different methodologies, some from Europe, some from Asia Pacific, and so forth, actually corroborated the results of the findings. Right. So, but I will say that we focus primarily on flooding and typhoons. I do want to go back one more thing to add in. In order to be successful on this, we need to be able to communicate this in a way that certain departments understand. Going back to your question about that, who is the intended audience? On this discussion of climate resilience, one of our internal intended audiences will be the insurance team, the finance team, because they're dealing with insurance. So from that perspective, then it becomes, why would that team care about these issues? How do I communicate in that way? I alluded earlier on that we've been working on a project which actually got some results this week. You all remember the torrential rain we had last year, okay, and the flooding incidents that happened around Hong Kong, particularly in Wong Tai Sin. One of our properties, at one point in time, I feel that we had the largest indoor swimming pool in all of Hong Kong. After that happened, what we started to do is actually put in place some of these mitigation measures, measure what the impact will be, prevent this from happening again. But more importantly, it wasn't enough to say, oh, we put up 15 floodgates. It's to go back and say these 15 floodgates can withstand flooding up to a certain level for a certain amount of time. And that assumes that the drainage systems weren't working. You go through review policies and procedures and so forth. So from that, last year, we did an ESG roadshow. We didn't, not with investors, but with our insurance teams, to let them know this is what we're doing. This year, we continue to build on our flood resilience because that was one of the key things we identified. And we continue to let the insurance brokers and also the insurance companies know how we've responded, what mitigation measures we've put in place, and to demonstrate the improvements that were available. So we did that roadshow again in September. And just this week, we got the results of our engagement and renewal of insurance policies. I think early on, one of the statements was in Asia Pacific, claims have been just going up the last 3 years, over 100 billion, right? And naturally, that would mean that your premiums increase. I'm very pleased to say that our insurance premiums for this latest round have actually decreased, despite having the flooding that we've had, right? And it's decreased more than what the, so this year, I believe, Chelsea will know this better than I will, the average insurance policy this year in Asia Pacific, I think, decreased about 3%. Our decrease was quite a few times larger than 3%. And we've had feedback from the insurance companies and the brokers to say, hey, the reason why this happened is because you were able to articulate the improvement. We've helped the insurance companies reduce their risk as well. So this is, again, going back to the situation of knowing who your audience is, communicating that improvement in a way that the risk side will understand so that they will give you a better premium. And we've been able to demonstrate that. So moving forward, the next week or so, we'll be issuing a white paper to talk about this with some of the insurance companies, just to give some of you insights into how we've approached this as well.
Great
and
stuff.
the savings was a few $1 million.
That's fantastic. You know, there's nothing more convincing than bringing someone from industry, whether it be, you know, from the insurance sector or an external voice to come and talk to the business. I think that is a really powerful tool, and I do encourage other people in there. Don't just use your internal people to try and push these things, but, you know, if you want to talk about sustainable finance, then get one of your banks in to actually talk to your investors or to your board or someone from insurance. It is really a refreshing perspective. Dipjay, again,
Sure.
large area. Just briefly, I'm conscious of time, you know, how have you found the best and most effective way to understand that physical element?
Yeah, for the size and the complexity of our operations, we had a third-party consultant, and like Kevin, we also had a small asterisk in our insurance policy where if you do an external physical risk assessment, there was some part of that fees to be paid by insurance companies. So I think it was quite a good business case for us. So yeah, we hired one of the big four, mapped out all the locations, uploaded that in their weather simulation softwares, and that's how we came up with the numbers. So. It's not just a supply chain, but we included supply chain, our key routes of transfer, so like key bottlenecks of logistical paths, stores, as well as a couple of agriculture belts from where we draw cottons and other raw materials. Yeah.
Great. I'm going to jump onto, you know, we're all very familiar talking about physical risk, and we all talk about floods and so forth, but, you know, transitional risk. You know, I'm sure if we ask the audience what their interpretation of transitional risks are, people would give you very, very different answers. And they're both technical terms, and often you could almost run these mutually exclusive in an organisation because it sometimes does feel like you need to do that and a whole new tranche. how you approach these two subjects. What I wouldn't mind doing, particularly given that we've got, Shelley and Chelsea on the panel, from an insurer's perspective and a bank's perspective, what do you see as the most, if you would just pick one, what do you see as the biggest transitional risk that as an organisation you look at, and how do you sort of, how are you starting to get your arms around it?
For us, as I mentioned, is our lending portfolio, investment portfolio, and that is in how we incorporate carbon footprint into our credit risk system. So, i.e., which means, for example, currently I have a client, is a fossil fuel company, fossil fuel vehicle, put in this way. Okay, fossil fuel vehicle company, by 2030, 2035, the government have a policy, no more fossil fuel vehicles on the street, right, on new vehicles. That means fossil fuel companies need to transit to EVs, basically. Everybody can understand this example? So how I manage my portfolio currently, if I have 20, 30, 100, 200 fossil fuel vehicle companies in my portfolio. So how RM can work with them, how we can assess. So that is what we are doing on terms of transition and how to engage clients. On the other hand side, those EV vehicle companies will be what? Will be our so-called green companies. So we also want to, as opportunity side, so in terms of transition risk, so that to us is a huge one. So two demands, if you use, I like use Nancy's demand. One demand is from the market transition. That means the vehicle companies need to transit. The other demand from banking, from our HKMS regulation. So they already have this climate agenda as well as a net zero transition. So you need to have the sector decarbonization target. Then we define 10 high carbon emitting sectors, including a lot, oil and gas, fossil fuel, blah, blah, transportation, aviation, all these. So these 10 sectors, basically, we call it as a high transition risk sectors. And then we have so-called client CTG, client transition journey. Client transition journey, same as my transition, our bank's transition journey, right? So client transition journey basically is our RM, relation manager, need to get the data from the client to see, do you have a target? How you transit? What is your decarbonization ways? And how we can help, basically. And so that is also doing the assessment, and is a very tedious work, basically. So we set up a system, collect the data, and doing the engagement. So all in the same time, and it gives the scores. The score means you are good, you are bad, you align with my transition journey, or you are not aligned with my transition journey. The question then is, if not, what should we do? So these are what we are doing in terms of how we actually be more climate resilient in terms of our lending portfolio, in terms of transition risk.
Look, and it's fantastic to hear that insight, because I think, it's easy to be in an organisation and you can get in a bit of a bubble going, here's what we're focused, here's what we're doing, and suddenly you think, oh, hang on, this is how banks are actually assessing us. This is how they are looking at us. Maybe if we're playing in this space, maybe we are starting to verge on a category of being a credit risk. Oh, okay, that's a completely different lens that maybe we mightn't take. So it's really good to sort of start bringing these perspectives in, because it can completely change the way you prioritise what you're looking at and what you do. What if you're perceived as being in a diminishing market, or a market that's going to become more and more under pressure, either through pricing, through other mechanisms, or legal, because of you're going down this path? You may think my business is really rock solid, but if a bank's going, we see that as a diminishing market, because whether it be you're relying on fossil fuel, or you're emissions intensive or energy intensive, then these are the things, that we do need to start considering. Chelsea, transitional risk, not just the nat cat. What are you saying?
I think we're a bit schizophrenic as insurers when it comes to transitional risk. On the one hand, we don't, on the one hand, for example, the energy sector, right? Renewable energy versus fossil fuel energy, right? We have a client, I think they're probably even in this room today, right? Where we're going through a renewal process where, we've been monitoring their transition from fossil fuel to renewable energy for the last 3 years, right? And we have co-set targets together to say, how can we get you to X percentage, right, of your energy being generated using clean energy. In this way, we are very much trying to push for a fundamental transition into the clean energy space, right, for renewable energy.
But if I'm interested, so why do you consider that to be an insurance risk? Like, how does it benefit an insurance company to be getting an organisation you're insuring to start moving out of fossil fuels and to increase their renewable energy intake?
Yeah, so this is the schizophrenic part, actually, because in fact, traditional fossil fuel production and generation is a much more profitable underwriting risk for insurance companies versus renewable energy. Right? So if you look at renewable energy and you look at, for example, offshore wind farms, which are largely around the Greater China region, right? The losses associated, insurable losses associated with these generators have been absolutely tremendous over the last 5 years, right? And the reason why that is, honestly, is because from a core industry perspective, so the guys and the girls who are running these and building these wind farms, actually the techniques and the technologies and the experience is relatively new when you think about it versus fossil fuel energy, right? So when you run and you operate and you build new coal plants, right, you probably have around 50 or 60 years of experience behind you, lots of mistakes made, and therefore you improve, right? And when you operate them, it's a lot safer in some cases. So versus, a big wind turbine or hundreds of big wind turbines standing in the middle of the ocean, right? So the techniques and the operating experience is actually much lower for new renewable energy sectors, right? So why do we do it? Okay, why do we do it? Number one, we are very similar to the banks. We see the fossil fuel industry as a diminishing industry, right? So we see the pickup of the economy, the opportunity, business opportunities, and the growth of the renewable energy sector as being much more the future. So whilst we will need to take a hit on our P&L and our balance sheet now because of that, right? We think that the investment in this and the support of this is going to be actually bring us more economic opportunities in the future.
In that long term, yeah.
In the long term. And I know you're going to cut me, but let me just finish off with Shelley's point, which is around EVs. So just to give you a taste of this, right? EVs have loss ratios, okay, for us, so claims that we're paying, are approximately around 15% or 20% more than what we do on traditional vehicles. So again, a new technology, a new way of renewable energy, clean transitional kind of energy usage, but again, for insurance companies, completely loss-making.
Is that because they're taking their hands off the wheel to reverse park, or is
I think it's because people like you who buy, no, I'm joking. No, it's because actually so for example, you've got battery fires, right? So again, the technology around batteries is relatively new, right? We're seeing less and less of this, by the way, but it's taken time for the entire industry, from the actual auto industry, not from the insurance industry, but the auto industry, to understand how they should be building and managing these type of risks, right? Even the charges that you charge with, right? We've seen fires come out of those. We've seen the incorrect charging can actually lead to damage to your own vehicle. Right? It's like when you add petrol into a diesel vehicle, right? That's going to damage the engine. But these are kind of the new risks that's happening that we didn't know about, that even the manufacturers of these cars and these batteries are learning about themselves. So we need to go into this journey because it is the future. The rest is a diminishing industry, right? But we're going to have to take risk in the meantime. So I think we're putting our money where our mouth is to say we will pay the losses to learn with all of you guys as industry to see how we can look to the future.
I think people will agree it was worth letting Chelsea speak a bit more there and not cutting her off. I'm going to transition a bit here with regards to, we've talked a lot of technical terms, we've talked a huge amount of audiences. Leadership engagement, all right? If this stuff comes from a couple of sustainability people in a function, it's not going to move anywhere. And it touches all elements, both the technical terms, and they can be, as I said before, seen as mutually exclusive, the transitional risk, the physical risk. Do you talk to the guys in, sales and marketing and leasing? Are you talking to the teams in acquisitions? Are you talking to legal? Are you talking to finance? Are you talking to treasury on bonds and so forth? Leadership engagement, any advice? Dipjay, I might start with you, and then maybe Kelvin. Any advice you would give on, these are two very complex areas. How are you engaging leadership? Have you kept transitional and physical? Did you start with physical risk and get their heads around it and then move to transitional, or were they parallel streams? Or, any insights there?
Yeah,
for someone in the room trying to do something like this,
Sure. I think first of all, the best way to engage leadership is to tie their bonuses, right? So at Adidas, we have the board KPI, as I mentioned, which is linked to the decarbonization and their bonuses, and everybody else who's working for Adidas, their bonuses are linked to that. That's the first thing. In terms of physical versus transitional risk, and again, it's my personal view. Transition risk is significantly bigger and more, I would say, perpetual than physical risk. Physical risk could be, let's say, one-time event, more localized event. It can write off your asset, but it could be just limited to one asset. Transition risk could be complete business model. Just think about Tesla's market cap versus any traditional car company's market cap, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. So basic 101 is what we tell our leadership team about what does transition risk mean. In a very simple word, transition risk is change of rules of the game. Again, I'm bringing in an analogy from the sports, right? So when the rules of the games are changed, your game is no more valid, no matter how proficient you are in your play, right? If the customer is not needing your product because the environment has changed, let's say if the temperature, the snowfall is reduced, what will be the impact on your ski gears? If there are certain markets from where we are sourcing our agro commodities, if those are experiencing very high heat waves, there'll be change in the yield of the cotton, and let's say supply chain will get affected. What are you going to do if, let's say, cotton t-shirts are, let's say, a significant portion of your bottom line? These are, as I said, like external changes. So transition risk is not, sometimes we always think it's a policy change, but it's not always about policy change. It can also about the overall economy change, customer mindset change. So upskilling them is the first thing I would say. Go for it.
It's that duration and that lasting element. It's not a single shock. This is not going to change tomorrow or the day after. This is actually the direction it's going, and that. Yeah. Okay. Calvin, you obviously talked about the physical risk and the experiences you went through in that event, and people having their aha moment. The transitional risk, how have you approached it, and sort of lessons or insights?
So the way I approach it, actually, I've kind of articulated already, right? Keep things simple. Get rid of jargon. I don't talk about 1.5 degrees. I don't talk about scenario 8.5 and so forth, because people typically don't understand what that means. I mean, even for me, I get confused with it sometimes. Talk about it in a language that your intended audience, and I go back to Dipjay's point, know who your intended audience is and speak their language. So I give you the example of the insurance side. Be able to present it from the language that they understand. The return on this will be this. You will have a lower insurance premium. Make them look good, essentially. On the part about physical versus transitional, the physical risk, I agree, it's a lot easier to discuss for the points I've mentioned earlier. The transitional side, in some ways, you let the external market push this as well. For me, my biggest focus on the transitional side is that reputational component. Do our investors feel confident that we know what our decarbonization strategy is? Sometimes it's going to be me pushing it, But a lot of times, just sit back and wait, because investors will ask this question and enable you to present this to the board, to senior management as well. So don't always bang against that door. There are allies outside of your organization. I want to go back and touch on your analogy about that playing field, the rules of the game. Most of you will know that the issues and challenges that we're dealing with, the methodologies, are largely Eurocentric, developed in European nations or possibly US. And we know that it doesn't fully apply here in Asia Pacific. But we also know that in Asia Pacific, this is where the growth is going to be. That's why we're here. That's why companies are still coming here. So one thing that we have a very good opportunity to do right now is to rewrite the rules of the game, specific to Asia Pacific. And if you're able to write the rules of the game, I think it's even better than adapting to the rules of the game, because you've said what this playing field is. And there are plenty of opportunities right now across various industries. We're talking about this together as well, right? To rewrite the rules of the game for your industry in Asia Pacific so that you have that advantage to deal with some of the physical and transitional risks as well.
Great. Look, I think, yeah, it's, and if you are able to start doing that through industry organisations, it can be very powerful, because it makes it simplifies the journey for the vast majority of organisations that aren't hugely resourced and don't have big teams, or in still, markets that are still maturing with regards to these things, rather than, trying to cut and paste a European solution in the Asian market. I'm conscious of time. I'm going to always mix things up a bit. And we're just going to go through one last question to each of you. Chelsea, from an insurer's perspective, with regards to what you're seeing around climate-related risk, what is the one thing you'd like to see more of organisations doing who are starting out on this journey that you think, okay, that's going to start adding some value straight away? What do you think? If you're talking to the broader, we've got the 1% that have been doing it for years, but that broader middle market, what would you like to start seeing more of if you could, we're approaching Christmas. What's your Christmas wish list?
All right. I think, honestly, from an insurer's perspective, I think you guys are our risk managers. So your actions basically dictate my results, right? So I think the one thing I would love to see more of is a bit more of a conversation between the client and the insurer on this particular topic, right? So going back to Calvin's point, the exercise that Link did this year, we were one of the insurers heavily involved in that. And in fact, we worked very closely with Calvin's team to understand their risk management, what other models look like, et cetera, et cetera. And for the first time, I think AXA actually put up a lead quote for the program, And you think that being the largest general insurer in Hong Kong, we would have looked at this many, many times. But that was the trick. The conversation, the understanding of what they're doing was the trick for us to become much more interested in providing our capacity at a competitive price, right? So if you want cheaper premiums or more, relevant coverage for you, then that's what you need to do. I would like to see a conversation much, much more on this topic.
Awesome. And Shelley, from a bank's perspective, you've got the legislation coming, all organisations are going to start, it's starting to hit the mid-tier organisations. What do you think, from a bank's perspective, and you're talking about credit risk, what would you like to see more of starting to come through in what they're reporting or doing that you think is really meaningful to the bank from a risk perspective and from a bank decision-making perspective?
I think these are two different things. Of course, they can be together. One is from reporting perspective, one is for performance perspective. So for reporting perspective, there is a lot of needs like regulators, like investors, like shareholders, right? So from that, how you present or disclose your performance is one way. On the other hand, I will be more focused on our performance side, because on performance side, if you ask me what I want to see in future, or if currently we do not have here at the moment for the banking center, there was a lot of things. Chelsea mentioned very easily these 2 years, fossil fuel sectors have very good return. So you have the fossil fuel sector have very good return, and why sustainability, we have sustainable finance. We want to have a hard target for sustainable finance and to work on the decarbonization of the sector. There is a very dilemma situation in the bank, right? And then at the board level, so before I joined the bank, I'm a consultant. I've been invited to different boards to give the training and a talk. So board will always ask me, Shelley, you talk about this climate change. Seems to me it's in future, not now, today, because we are surviving today. So give me a solution for survival today. Now you can see this is, if you ask me, my expectation. So this is where you really want to, as I go back to my first presentation, future-proofed. Also go back to today's forum's theme is future-proofed. So future-proofed is you stand here, I sit here, right? I need to look at future. And that is a belief. I'm an environmentalist. I'm trained as an environmental engineer for many years. And you need to, every one of us need to have that belief. If we do not have that belief, like Donald Trump, this is doomed. So you need to have a belief that you are now today here, you see the future. This is coming very quickly. We'll talk about 2030, now it's 2024. So that's 5, 6 years to go. So you need to have that belief first. So if you want me to think about that, to expect what I want, I think that is one thing, most important thing. No matter from the top management, the board top management, no matter for solution, no matter from the sector. So that is your survival. You can survive or you're going to die in future. So that is, otherwise this can be very difficult. And during that, people need to understand. So that go back to my second point in my previous presentation is, my people need to understand what we are talking about. That including board. For our board, I think we are good because they are quite concerned about all these things. And we need to give the board the very frequent update what is happening all over the world, what is happening in terms of regulator. Yeah. We need to engage regulator before they actually announce some new regulations.
Absolutely.
So that is include our colleagues, as I mentioned, like RMs, relationship manager. They are the people to face to our client day by day, right? Day to day. So that is my point if I want to see the future.
Thank you. Kelvin, I'm going to ask you a left field one. You've talked a lot about collaboration, As developers, we can often be developing a plot of land beside each other. We can both spend a huge amount of money on getting climate risk assessments done on these plots of land, and they are directly adjacent to each other in a very same neighbourhood, in the very same part of Hong Kong, and that's a big investment for information that goes once off into that site and disappears. How do you think we can lower the barrier to make this information more accessible to a greater part of people that play in real estate in Hong Kong and GBA, so that we've got that baseline of information, so we at least all start from here, and then if we are going to make these additional investments, we're increasing this level of knowledge so that everyone's going to benefit?
So I think the simple answer to that is go through some of the building certifications and benchmarks. Most notably now, Hong Kong GBC has neighborhood BEAM certification. There are a few organizations in this room that have actually proceeded with that neighborhood certification. The beauty behind this is that neighborhood does exactly what you've just said. Engage the people that are around, find out what needs to be done, what's already been done, use that information. We can rely on GBC to also provide some of these case studies for us to follow. There's also, lead neighborhood and so forth. And I think that we're starting to see some of these approaches that encourage more communication, collaboration. In the end, it does come down to me and you just sitting down saying, hey, you have your place there, I have my place here, what are we doing here? Goes back to Shelley's point about bringing in some of the district people, government people to look at this from a master planning approach. So it's still exactly how you started, communication, collaboration, and there's some tools that are already available.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for that, Calvin. Look, I completely agree. I'm getting asked to wrap up here, and I appreciate lunch is ready to rock and roll. Dipjay, it is really insightful to hear, the various challenges that obviously an organisation like Adidas face across these geographies, and actually how climate sort of plays a key role. Is there any other things that you kind of really think are pertinent that, you know, as consumers of the product or as people that either make the product or ship the product or otherwise or interact with the organisation that really need to consider from a climate-related perspective?
Honestly, the hard fact of the life is, as of now, a very small portion of consumer cares for environment. I mean, some of you may not like this comment, but that's the fact. I mean, if you still don't agree, I would invite to any of our stores, stand there for a day and ask and have a conversation with customer and see how many of them ask questions on sustainability. So I unless the design is great, the product is performing, then last comes the sustainability. So I won't say consumer is a key driver for this moment, but it's a regulation that should and as of now, as a society, we are not conscious enough to really appreciate the climate change and its impact and the need of an hour to work on it. And now I would say also the need of an hour to go for lunch. So yeah, I go back to my consumer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the speakers and everyone here who's sat so patiently through this. I think we only have one question, and Chelsea, you're going to have to answer it in a super short amount of time. I'm talking 30 seconds, because even I don't understand this question. What role do you see, and there's only one question from the audience here, what role do you see for parametric insurance in relation to climate change? And can you start with a prelude of what is parametric insurance for people like me?
Okay, no worries. Parametric insurance is essentially an index-linked insurance product. So which means that, for example, if we talk about heat stress, if temperatures go beyond X degrees for a number of days, then the insurance product is triggered and is paid out. And the benefit is pre-agreed. So there's no loss adjustment that is done at that time. So to answer the question very quickly, I think parametric insurance definitely has a role to play. The limits that you'll be able to obtain under parametric insurance, and we're one of the only providers of it in the world, is very limited. So there will not be a huge amount of capacity available for this. So I wouldn't use this as your solution to cover a $1 billion, property building or something like that. That does not make any sense whatsoever. But what it does do is, for example, for renewable energy like solar farms, okay, we will be able to model for the amount of sun production. So therefore, the amount of number of sunny days, okay, and how the rays are coming down on the farm.
It's always sunny days.
Yeah, it's always sunny days in Hong Kong. No, but essentially we are able to model for that. And when you are building that solar farm, when you're dependent on a natural resource to actually bring you that energy production, we can actually produce an insurance product that can help you with guaranteeing that if there is less sunny days, then you have a business interruption, we can actually give you a payment for that. So that's an example of that, right? So there is a role to play in climate change, both on the opportunity side, also on the risk side, like heat stress for people, So all of that does make sense, but it's it's a tactical product, right? So it's not the core solution to your risk management.
Fantastic. And there you go. We'll leave it on sunny days. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our esteemed panel members and for your time. And please have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the comprehensive and fruitful discussion. I think most of the people here have really learned a lot from the sharing of the risk mitigation from different perspectives and also the associated opportunities. So please come forward to take a group photo. May I now invite Michael and also all the panelists. Thank you so much. Please be seated.